and along with other Wall Street firms, drove us into the worst economic downturn since the Great Depression. Millions of people, as you all know, lost their jobs, they lost their homes, and they lost their life savings. It's a terrible, terrible time. Last week, Goldman Sachs reached an agreement with the federal government to pay a $5 billion, that's a B, $5 billion fine. And what the fine was for is that Goldman Sachs, like other major financial institutions, defrauded investors and sold them subprime mortgage packages that were essentially worthless. And they knew it. Okay? So they have paid a $5 billion fine, which kind of tells you that their business model is fraud. That's what it is. Now, politically, over the last 25 years, this very same company has been engaged in what we call a revolving door. You all know what a revolving door means? What it means is that people on Wall Street or corporate America go into government, represent the interest of Wall Street, and then after their time in government, they leave and they go back to the private sector. Goldman Sachs has placed dozens and dozens of people in very high levels of government in Democratic and Republican administrations, including in the last 25 years, 2 secretaries of the Treasury, which are perhaps the most important position in an administration. One in a Democratic administration, one in a Republican administration. Goldman Sachs, like other firms on Wall Street, also provides huge amounts of campaign contributions to the candidates of its choice, and also provides speaking fees to people. Now, $5 billion fine is paid by Goldman Sachs. Today, somewhere in Iowa or in Vermont, some kid is getting picked up for the possession of marijuana. That kid will have a police record that will stay with him for his entire life. But strange on top of strange, absurd on top of absurd, not one of the Wall Street executives who have paid billions of dollars in fines for illegal activity will have a police record. That is a broken criminal justice system. The country means anything. What justice means, you remember that? We learned that in school, the equal scale. Whether you're rich, whether you're poor, we all abide by the same rules. But it appears that is not the case. So we have a situation today where not only are banks too big to fail, they get bailed out, but banksters are too big to jail. And that has got to be changed. And I think when you understand why it is in America today that people are angry and demoralized, I think it has a lot to do with things like that. They understand that certain things happen to them and their kids, they don't happen to the people on top. So together, we are going to change that. I'll tell you something else that we're going to change. We bailed out Wall Street. I didn't vote for it, but others voted for it. Bailed out Wall Street because the big banks were too big to fail. Today, 3 out of the 4 largest banks in this country are bigger, significantly bigger, than they were when we bailed them out because they were too big to fail. Today, the 6 largest financial institutions in this country have assets of about $10 trillion. 6 financial institutions. That's equivalent to about 60% of the GDP of America. They issue 2/3 of the credit cards and about 1/3 of the mortgages in America. In my view, when you have a handful of financial institutions who have so much economic and political power, what we need to do is, number 1, bring back Glass-Steagall legislation. Number 2, break them up. Yeah. Now, people very often ask me, they say, well, what is the major issue that you're concerned about? And it's always impossible to say, well, this issue is the major issue, because all of these issues we're talking about are so important. But there is one issue which uniquely impacts every other issue, and that is the disastrous Supreme Court decision on Citizens United. And here is the simple truth. The simple truth is that our current campaign finance system is corrupt. It is undermining American democracy. And in my mind, what democracy is about, you agree with me, that's great. You disagree with me, that's great. Let's have a debate, let's talk about our ideas, let's go forward. But you don't have the right, just because you are a billionaire, to buy an election. That's not democracy. And today, what the Supreme Court has enabled to happen is to say to the wealthiest people in this country, you already own much of the economy, now we're going to give you the privilege of buying the United States government. And don't kid yourself, that is exactly what is taking place right now. It's what all these super PACs are about. Let me take a detour here and tell you with a great deal of pride, I am the only candidate running for the Democratic nomination that does not have a super PAC. Thought about it, and after about a tenth of a second, what we decided, and it's a difficult issue, because, you know how much it takes to run for president of the United States? Hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars, or more, maybe a billion, who knows? And we had to determine, how we could raise a decent sum of money. And we ended up doing the old-fashioned way. We went out to working families all over this country, and we said, if you want to help us transform this country, make government work for all of us, we need your help. And you know what happened? We received in the last 9 months 2.5 million individual contributions, more than any candidate in the history of this country up until this point. We don't have a super PAC. Wall Street is not pouring in huge sums of money, and the drug companies, none of those guys are. But here's what's going on. Today you got families like the Koch brothers. You all know the Koch brothers? The Koch brothers are very anxious right now. They're very unhappy because they're only in second place. They're only the second wealthiest family in America behind the Waltons. So what they are trying to do is to get themselves more tax breaks and to cut Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. That's what they are trying to do. Meanwhile, they and a few of their billionaire friends have pledged to spend in this campaign cycle $900 million to elect candidates who will represent the wealthy and the powerful. $900 million, a few billionaires. Now when you have, and I just want you to think about this, when you have one family and a few of their friends, a handful of people, spending more money on a campaign than either the Democratic Party or the Republican Party, you're not seeing democracy. What you're looking at is oligarchy, and that is something we have got to stop. So my promise to you is that no Supreme Court justice that I nominate will get that position unless he or she makes it crystal clear that they will vote to overturn Citizens United. When we talk about what's going on in America, we all know that if we are going to succeed economically, we need to have the best educated workforce in the world. There was a time 30, 40 years ago when we did. Today, we do not. Today, there are hundreds of thousands of bright and qualified young people who want to go to college, who are capable of doing college work, but can't go to college for one reason. Their families lack the money. And that is why I believe that in the year 2016, when we talk about public education, and by the way, Iowa has historically been one of the leaders in the fight for public education. But when we talk about public education today, what we should understand is that public colleges and universities should be tuition free. Is this a radical idea? I don't think so. I mean, I think the world has changed. 40, 50 years ago, a high school degree allowed you to go out, make it into the middle class, get a good job. Today, in many respects, that's what a college degree is about. But it's not just. There are a lot of kids out there who don't want to go to college, and that's fine. They should be able to get the training they need to be plumbers and carpenters and sheet metal workers. We've got to make sure that happens as well. When we talk about higher education and higher education financing, there's another outrage. Another thing that's pretty crazy going on out there. And that is that millions of our people, some young, some not so young, are stuck with outrageous levels of student debt. Yep. Anybody in this room dealing with student debt?
Yep.
Whoa, all right, well, welcome to the club.
15 years.
Okay. What?
For 15 years.
For 15 years. Are you better off today? Have you paid off any of the debt, or you're?
All but 1,000, but I still have it. It was 98.
Oh,
15 years he's been paying off his debt. I met a guy.
Around that.
Pardon me?
Around 15.
Around 15 years. I met a guy who was paying off his student debt for 25 years, and actually he was worse off today because of interest rates than he was when he took out the debt. And he was literally afraid. He's about 55 years old. He was afraid that when he got Social Security, they would garnish his Social Security check to pay his student debt. That's, you know, and you meet kids. I was here in Iowa a couple of weeks ago. Met a young man, late 20s, married, 2 kids, $90,000 in debt, paying over 50% of his income in student debt. It goes on and on and on. I mean, it is unbelievable. So I think what we have got to do is say that people should not be punished for the crime of wanting to get a higher education. They should not have to pay 20-25% of their income in student debt. They should not have to delay getting a car, getting married, having kids. That's pretty crazy stuff. So we are proposing, we have legislation in to make sure that people can refinance their student debt and get the lowest possible interest rates available. Save people a whole lot of money.
Yeah.
Now, my critics will say, well, Bernie, that's a nice idea, but that's expensive. And they're right. It costs about $70 billion a year. And I'll tell you how we are going to pay for that proposal. We're going to put a tax on Wall Street speculation. Now, when Wall Street, greed and illegal behavior help destroy our economy and help destroy Wall Street, you bailed them out. Now it is time for Wall Street to help the middle class of this country. When we talk about our responsibilities as parents, as adults, grandparents, I think there is nothing more important than making sure that we leave this planet in a way that is healthy and habitable to our kids. I am a member of the Senate Environmental Committee and the Senate Energy Committee. And in that capacity, I have met scientists throughout our country and throughout the world. And here is the simple, straightforward truth. The debate is over. Climate change is real. Climate change is caused by human activity. Climate change is already causing devastating problems in our country and around the world. And what the scientists also tell us is if we do not get our act together, by the end of this century, this planet, our only planet, will be between 5 and 10 degrees Fahrenheit warmer. And what that means is more drought, more floods, more extreme weather disturbances, more acidification of the ocean that we're already doing enormous damage to the ocean, more rising sea levels. It will also mean more conflict around the world as people fight over limited natural resources. It seems to me pretty clear that we have a moral responsibility for our children, for our grandchildren, to do everything that we can to combat climate change. And that means having the courage to take on the fossil fuel industry and moving away from fossil fuel to energy efficiency and sustainable energy.
Yeah!
And in that regard, I want to congratulate the state of Iowa for being a leader in this country in terms of wind and biofuels. Thank you for the model that you're setting. And by the way, it also means to me opposition to the Bakken pipeline and to other pipelines in Vermont and elsewhere, New Hampshire. When we talk about thinking big and not small, when we understand that we are the wealthiest country in the history of the world, we're not a poor country, we're a very, very wealthy country. It is important for us to understand that the United States today is the only major country on earth that does not guarantee health care to all people as a right. But number one. Now, I'm on the committee that worked on the Affordable Care Act. It's called the Health Education and Labor Committee. It was chaired for a while by your former Senator, Tom Harkin, and I worked with Tom. And in my view, the Affordable Care Act has done a number of very good things for our country. We have ended the obscenity of what private insurance companies used to do in terms of pre-existing conditions. You remember that? And I think history will look back and say, I cannot believe that you allowed such a crazy situation to exist. So what pre-existing conditions were about is, say, if you're a woman and you had breast cancer 5 years ago and you're worried about a recurrence, your insurance policy would say, okay, we can cover you for everything except the possibility of a recurrence of breast cancer. In other words, they will cover you for everything except what you need most. That was pre-existing conditions. Got rid of that. We also created a situation by which 17 million more Americans now have health insurance. And we brought some equality in pricing to make sure that women are not forced to pay more than men for health care. So we made some good progress. But, and I voted for that, and it required 60 votes, and we got 60 votes. Not 61, we got 60 votes to pass it. But let's be honest and understand that despite the passage of the Affordable Care Act, we still have 29 million Americans who have no health insurance. We have many more who are underinsured with high deductibles and high copayments. Does that ring a bell to anybody here? All right. Tell me about deductibles. Who wants to talk about deductibles? What are some of the deductibles we have? $4,300. $5,000. $12,000. Okay. I saw at a previous meeting a gentleman in a large family of 6 had $13,000 for his family. And what that means when you have a high deductible, and somebody was saying she has a high copayment in the last meeting, she had to pay $150 every time she went to the doctor. Okay. Now, what all of that means is that if you get sick and you don't have a lot of money and you have a high deductible, what happens? You don't go to the doctor. And I have talked to doctors in Vermont, in fact, all over this country. And what they tell me is that they see people walking into their offices very, very sick. And they say, why didn't you come when you first noticed your symptom? And people will say, well, I have a high deductible, I don't have any money, I don't have any insurance. Sometimes doctors lose those patients. Sometimes they walk in when they are so sick that they cannot be effectively treated. And we lose thousands of people a year just for that reason. Other times they go to the hospital after all of their suffering, and the system ends up spending tens of thousands of dollars treating them. And if they had walked to the doctor in the first place when they needed to, it would have been much less expensive. Furthermore, on top of all of that, we pay by far the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs. Any of you deal with our good friends in the pharmaceutical industry?
Yeah.
Right. Pharmaceutical industry, last year, the three major drug companies made $45 billion in profit, at the same time as 1 out of 5 Americans cannot afford to fill their doctor's prescription. Is that pretty crazy? And what happens if you don't fill the doctor's prescription? You get sick, and you end up in the emergency room, or you end up in the hospital at more expense to the system than if you're able to fill the prescription in the first place. Pretty crazy stuff. So here is my view. My view is the Affordable Care Act has made important progress. But I think we have got to go further. So I know that I am criticized for this, but let me lay it out to you and be honest with you. I believe that health care is a right of all people, not a privilege.
Yeah.
And here's the other point. It's not just so many people uninsured or underinsured. You all know that we spend much, much more per capita on health care than the people of any other major country. We spend almost 3 times per person more than they do in the United Kingdom. They guarantee health care to all their people. We spend 50% more than the French guarantee health care to all of their people. We spend significantly more than the Canadians. I live 50 miles away from the Canadian border. Spend much more than they do. They guarantee health care to all of their people. So you add all of that up, and it seems to me the logical progression is to move toward a Medicare for all single-payer program. Last point. Point is about national priorities. A great nation is not judged by the number of millionaires and billionaires it has. A great nation, a compassionate nation, is judged by how it treats its most vulnerable people. And by definition, the most vulnerable people are the children and the elderly. And I have to say, not with any pride, that we are not doing well in either case. We have the highest rate of childhood poverty of almost any major country on earth. About 20% of our kids living in poverty. Half of the kids in public schools in America are on free or reduced lunches. And in terms of seniors, there are millions of seniors in this country who are trying to make it on $12,000 or $13,000 a year Social Security. Think about that. Think about being 85 years of age, needing health care, needing prescription drugs, needing to keep your home warm in the winter, trying to make it on $12,000 a year. And you know what? You can't do it. Nobody can. Now, my Republican colleagues are going around and they're saying we should cut Social Security. Not sure. That's what they think. I believe the very opposite. I believe that we should expand Social Security benefits. And the way we do that is pretty simple. It's what Obama campaigned on here in Iowa in 2008. And that is lift the cap on taxable income. Right now, somebody's making $5 million, somebody's making $118,000. They're both contributing the same amount into the Social Security Trust Fund. If you saw it at $250,000, that's the top 1.5% of American taxpayers. Start at $250,000, lift the cap. We can extend the life of Social Security from the 19 years it currently has in terms of solvency to 50 years. And for those people living on less than $16,000,